Hey movie fans, with the rise of streaming and digital distribution, the ongoing actor strike, and a slew of high-profile big-budget movies failing to live up to their potential at the box office this past summer, it really gets me wondering, what is the future of movies in the entertainment business as a whole? So that's what I want to talk about today. What is the current landscape of the movie industry, and what is it going to look like down the road? So today, I want to look at my top 5 theories and predictions for where I think the movie and film entertainment business is going within the next 5 years, so 2028 leading into the 2029 movie season. Oh boy, that's just a weird thought to think about, isn't it? First of all, I think one of the biggest trends when it comes to movies in the future has to be related to budget. This past year, we saw a slew of high-budgeted, big spectacle action, adventure, comic book movies all failed to make their budget back. Movies like The Haunted Mansion, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, The Flash, or Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 all had huge budgets that all really underperformed at the box office this past year. Now in the cases of Indiana Jones and The Flash, a big part of the reason why they had such big budgets was extensive reshoots, allegedly. But the other big factor for all of these movies having such high budgets, higher than usual budgets in fact, is COVID. There's still these long lingering effects. When you have an event that big, yeah, it's going to have ripple effects for years to come. We still got to remember that, yeah, change takes time, for better or for worse. So we're seeing on screen now. It just happens that we had really bad luck with all of these movies. Because of past events and how high these budgets got, I think studios moving forward will be very cautious about how they decide to spend their money. I don't see them letting things get this far out of hand again. Now granted, hopefully this is a once in a lifetime freak occurrence that never happens again. But in Hollywood, budgets have been trending upward for quite a few years now, and the bubble is bound to burst eventually. That things will not keep up with it. Eventually, there's going to be some movies that just fail to live up to expectations. So I think going forward, studios are only going to put a whole lot of money into 1 or 2 projects a year, and then they're going to kind of divert their attention elsewhere. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I just don't think we're going to get as many big, huge spectacle, action, adventure, comic book movies as we get nowadays. But just because we're scaling back on the big, large-scale action epics doesn't mean we're going to scale back on movies entirely. No, I think because we're reducing the number of big budgeted movies, I think we're going to see the return of mid-level budgeted movies. So instead of movies having budgets anywhere from like $90 to $180 million, I think we're going to start seeing movies in the $30 to $75 million range of like rom-coms or non-IP based related action movies or interesting comedies for the whole family or dramas. We used to have interesting mid-level comedies like The Hangover or Step Brothers. We don't see a lot of those anymore. I could see that returning because they're relatively cheap to make and in return can make you a lot of money. It's why horror has become so popular and always is in times of financial crisis. Next up, I don't think we're going to see this fully fledged yet, but I think we're going to start slowly making baby steps towards this process, and that is a move away from shared cinematic universes. We know within the next 5 to 6 years, depending on how their production cycle goes, that Marvel is working on Avengers, the Kang Dynasty, and Avengers Secret Wars. I see that as the end goal for Marvel currently as it stands, and then they're going to reboot the universe and start from scratch. But more importantly, I see the entire movie industry trying to move away from shared cinematic universes. They've always tried to copy the Marvel formula ever since Avengers in 2012 just blew up the box office and everyone's going, we want that success, but we don't want to work for it and put in the time and effort that Marvel has done to actually build this universe up. We just want the profits. And everyone else has tried it, but not nearly as successfully as the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I think studios, they're slow to change and slow to feedback by and large. So they keep trying ideas and it doesn't stick. I think within the next 5 years, Marvel included, we will move away, at least see the beginning stages of a move away from shared universes, more back to singular individual stories that may or may not be connected to other things, but we're just going to focus on telling good stories moving forward. Next up, there seems to be a very complicated relationship, to say the least, right now between the streaming services and movie theaters. I think in the future, within the next 5 years, in order for both to survive, they need to work together, because right now Streaming services are still trying to figure it out, but as much as people say that they're two sides completely different from each other, I think both are incredibly necessary and important to the future of filmmaking going forward, and I think they're going to depend on each other a lot. Movies and the movie theater experience have weathered a lot of storms throughout the decades, as we'll talk about later on here. Movie theaters and streaming services gotta figure out a way to work together, and I think they will for the betterment of each other within the next 5 years. We're already seeing a little bit of examples of this. Last winter, you had Netflix releasing Knives Out Glass Onion in theaters for about 2 weeks for limited release, and that did great numbers. I'm honestly surprised that they didn't extend it out more. Now, granted, Netflix probably had to make some of that money back for spending so much money acquiring the rights to Knives Out, but Netflix in particular could really benefit from having movies show in theaters first before they go to their streaming services. Say what you want about how David Zaslav is running Warner Brothers, he understands that movies need to go to theaters first before they go to their streaming services. Hence why, despite the fact that The Flash and Black Adam both flopped at the box office, they were the most viewed programs on HBO Max when they initially debuted because people had heard about them. There's a word of mouth. Same thing happened with The Batman, but the difference is that made a lot of money. It is proven if you put your movie in theaters first, you make a lot more money and you get a lot more eyeballs on your product when it eventually does hit streaming. Now, here's my other bold prediction. I think we're done with day and date releases for the most part, or we will see the end of that within the next 5 years. I think we're going to move away from those day and date releases as studios are going to be looking towards, okay, we have the streaming project, we need to make as much revenue as possible, and it's still proven if you want to make money, put it in theaters and market it. Right now, the biggest problem for movies is their marketing. I think a big part of the reason why Barbie and Oppenheimer did so well, Barbenheimer marketed itself. You need to market your movies better, and I don't think studios have done a great job marketing their movies particularly well, but I don't think streaming and theaters are as much adversaries as people want them to be. I think they just want a good narrative. I think in order to survive, the two of them are going to come together mega power style as opposed to be enemies. They realize there's more money to be made working together than apart. Speaking of streaming, I think within the next 5 years, one of the key major streaming services will no longer exist. I think they will either shut their doors, be bought out by a bigger studio like an Apple, or be merged into another app. Now, the most likely candidate, I think, in this situation is probably Paramount. So why do I think Paramount is probably the leading candidate for this? It's because they don't have any secondary income. A lot of the other major streaming services have other forms of revenue bolstering their bottom line, so to speak. You have Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime Video, they don't really care about. They're just like, we've got Prime. We run the world. Apple is Apple. I don't think they care about Apple TV either. That's just a function that they have. They focus more on also running the world. You have Disney, who has the parks division, which is single-handedly keeping the company afloat. And as much as people bag on Peacock, that is run by Universal and Comcast. Comcast, in case you didn't know, is not really strapped for cash, and they also have a theme park division which is thriving at levels that they've never thrived at before. They're doing incredibly well, whereas Paramount is still a dedicated movie studio. They're always on a little bit of shaky ground. I could see them trying to team up with somebody else, maybe a Sony, but Sony's been making alliances elsewhere. I think Paramount could definitely be folded or absorbed into something else. I don't see them making a long trek. But why do I think a streaming service in general is in any danger? Everyone's like, I love streaming. I like watching stuff at home. True. But like MoviePass, streaming is becoming one of those things that it's too good to be true for the people making it. A lot of people within the streaming industry are going, yeah, this business model is not sustainable for revenue. That's why you're getting more and more ads in streaming. You're getting more and more of that, like, well, here's the ad supported tier, here's the free option or the cheaper option with ads, because there's a certain cap to how much studios can make within streaming. That is why you're seeing so many ads. That's why you're seeing so many price hikes, because they're realizing, oh, we're pouring billions upon billions of dollars into this industry and it is not working out financially. This is a too good to be true value for the customer. Businesses don't care if it's too good for you. They want the deal to be either fair or more in their favor. It's why MoviePass did not work out. That deal was ridiculously too good. Of, hey, $10 a month to see all the movies you want. Oh, you actually are going to see all the movies you want. That's a bad idea. I don't think the business model of streaming services, as it currently stands, is sustainable for the companies that run them, and they're learning that very quickly and making us as consumers pay for it. So watch. Streaming will change, as you know, a lot within the next 5 years. There's going to be a lot of trial and error, I think, and I think there's going to be some casualties, and Paramount, I think, is the one with the biggest target on their back. Lastly is probably my most bold and most random prediction, but if you listen to my logic and rationale, it might not be as crazy as you think. When it comes to movies in the entertainment business, whenever theaters feel like they are on the back foot, whenever they feel like they're threatened or they need something new to stay fresh, they always come up with a new gimmick to get people in theaters. And I think within the next 5 years, I don't know necessarily what it will be, but I could see theaters introducing a new gimmick. Look in the past. Always look to the past when you want clues as to what may happen in the future. Those that don't study history are doomed to repeat it, as the saying goes. In the 1950s, America was introduced to this wonderful new thing called the television. People decided, I would much rather watch things at home than go to the theater to watch stuff. Boy, this sounds oddly familiar, doesn't it? So what did movie theaters do? They introduced 3D and marketed the crap out of it. So many movies in the 50s relied so heavily on this gimmick of 3D. The movies weren't particularly great, but boy, was it something you couldn't get at home. Then they introduced widescreen, the grand epic look that you could only get in the theater. The big sweeping shots of Lawrence of Arabia you could only see in the theater, not on your tiny little tube TV in your living room. You need to see this on the big screen. They gave you reasons to go to the theater. And once again, I think that'll be what happens here. Fast forward to 2008, 2009 era. James Cameron's Avatar debuts and reintroduces the world to 3D, and a whole bunch of theaters scrambled to implement digital projectors and 3D technology into the theaters. Now granted, that did not take off nearly as much as it did in the 50s, and 3D has died off, and I'm not saying 3D is returning, but I am saying theaters could be looking to new ways to incentivize people to come back to the theater, and a new gimmick could be on the horizon. I don't know what that gimmick could be, but when in doubt, theaters have been known to get creative to find ways to get people back in the theater, and I think that's exactly the route that we're going. I don't know what it is, but I think how we enjoy movies at the theater is bound to change within the next 4 to 5 years in particular, or else the theaters have been in trouble in the past and they've been just fine. I think they're going to survive a lot longer. They just have to try experimenting with some new and clever ideas. What do you guys think? What do you think movies will look like within the next 5 years? I know it's short but long forecasting. What do you guys think? I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, your theories. Do you think I'm way off? Do you think I'm spot on? Whatever your thoughts, let me know down in the comments below. And as always, if you like what you see and want to see more, subscribe to the channel. And as always, stay sharp, movie guys and gals.